Introduction. Let's start with something honest. Most of us have a complicated relationship with money. We want enough of it to feel secure, but sometimes we also want it to make us feel successful, respected, independent, or important. We may tell ourselves that we are making practical decisions, while underneath those decisions there can be fear, pressure, comparison, or the simple desire to feel better for a moment. That does not make us bad people. It makes us human. The important thing is whether we are willing to notice it. Think about the last time you spent money without really planning to. What was happening that day? Were you excited, tired, stressed, trying to reward yourself, trying to keep up with someone? Or perhaps you simply wanted a little relief. Now think about a different moment, one when you had to make a difficult choice. Did you stay patient, or did you react quickly? Did you follow what you believed was right, or did you let fear make the decision? These ordinary moments tell us more about ourselves than we often realize. Money can act like a mirror. It does not necessarily make us more disciplined, more generous, more anxious, or more status conscious. Sometimes it simply gives those qualities a clearer stage. That is what this audiobook is about. We are going to look beyond money itself and examine the person making the decisions. We will talk about identity, habits, emotions, discipline, comparison, scarcity, status, values, resilience, and self-mastery. But this is not about pretending you have everything figured out. It is not about becoming perfectly disciplined or never making another mistake. Real growth is much more ordinary than that. It is noticing a pattern and deciding to handle it differently next time. It is catching yourself before an impulse becomes an action. It is admitting that something you once wanted no longer matters. It is learning to keep a promise to yourself, even when nobody else knows whether you kept it. So as you listen, do not try to become a completely different person overnight. Instead, pay attention. Notice what feels uncomfortable. Notice what sounds familiar. Notice which stories make you think, that sounds like me. Those moments are valuable because money may reveal who you are today, but your choices are still writing the person you become tomorrow. Chapter 1. Audit the person behind your money. Most people think they know themselves until something puts their habits under pressure. Money has a strange ability to do exactly that. It can turn quiet tendencies into visible behavior. It can show you how patient you really are, how much approval you seek, how easily you panic, how strongly you cling to comfort, and whether your values survive when your emotions become louder than your intentions. Consider Daniel. He never thought of himself as impulsive. In his mind, impulsive people were reckless, careless, and constantly buying things they did not need. Daniel believed he was simply rewarding himself after working hard. A difficult week would end, and he would order something unnecessary. A stressful afternoon would lead to another purchase. When he felt behind his friends, he would upgrade something he already owned. Each decision seemed small enough to explain away. Then one evening, Daniel tried an experiment. Instead of looking at what he had purchased, he looked at when he had purchased it. A pattern appeared. His spending increased when he felt disappointed, tired, or insecure. The purchases were not random. They were responses. That discovery bothered him because it changed the question. He had been asking, "Do I need this?" Now he had to ask, "What am I trying to feel?" That is a much harder question. Your own patterns may be just as revealing. Perhaps you become extremely cautious when money feels uncertain. Perhaps you spend more when you are celebrating. Perhaps you become generous when people are watching, but strangely protective when nobody is. Maybe you constantly compare your lifestyle with people around you. Maybe you avoid looking at certain decisions because you already know what they will tell you. Do not rush to judge yourself. Judgment can make you defensive, and defensiveness makes honest observation difficult. Instead, become curious. Imagine that your money behavior is a fingerprint. No single decision tells the whole story, but repeated movements create a pattern that is uniquely yours. The goal is not to decide whether the fingerprint is good or bad. The goal is to recognize it. Start by looking at your reactions. What happens inside you when you receive more than expected? Do you immediately think about what you can buy? Do you feel relief? Do you become more confident? Do you start imagining how other people might see you? What happens when money becomes tight? Do you become focused and practical, or anxious and avoidant? Do you begin comparing yourself with others? Do you blame circumstances? Do you become more disciplined, or do you seek immediate comfort? There are no impressive answers here. There are only honest ones. Now try a thought experiment. Imagine that every money-related decision you made during the last year was recorded and played back without explanation. No excuses, no context, just the decisions. Imagine watching yourself from the outside. What would you notice? You might discover that you repeatedly choose convenience over patience, or that you sacrifice your priorities to impress people. You might notice that fear influences you more than you realized. You might discover that you are actually more disciplined than you give yourself credit for. That last possibility matters too. Self-awareness is not supposed to become self-attack. If your behavior reveals strengths, acknowledge them. If it reveals weaknesses, investigate them. Both are useful information. Today, perform your own personal audit. Think about 5 recent decisions involving money, comfort, status, or consumption. For each one, ask, what happened? What did I feel? What did I want? What did I fear? What did I choose? And most importantly, what did that choice practice? That final question changes everything, because a decision is not only an event, it is rehearsal. Every time you act, you strengthen something. Patience, impulse, courage, fear, discipline, approval-seeking, independence, avoidance. You are always practicing becoming someone. So do not ask only, was that a good decision? Ask the deeper question, what kind of person did that decision train me to become? Once you can answer that honestly, you have something far more valuable than judgment. You have a starting point. Chapter 2. Detach your identity from your income. There is a dangerous question people sometimes ask without realizing how much power it gives away. What am I worth? The question sounds simple, but if the answer is built around achievement, possessions, recognition, or financial circumstances, identity can become unstable. When those things rise, confidence rises with them. When they fall, confidence can collapse. A person begins treating external conditions as a verdict on who they are. Consider a fictional character named Eleanor. For years, Eleanor introduced herself through what she had accomplished. She felt proud when people admired her progress, and she felt uncomfortable whenever she believed she was falling behind. Nothing about her personality had suddenly changed, yet her opinion of herself seemed to change every time her circumstances changed. One afternoon, Elena received disappointing news about something she had worked hard to achieve. Her first reaction was not simply disappointment, it was embarrassment. She began thinking, maybe I am not as capable as I thought. Notice what happened. A temporary circumstance had quietly turned into an identity statement. The event said, this did not work. Her mind translated it into, I am not enough. That translation is where the real psychological problem begins. We often confuse what happens to us with who we are. A difficult season becomes, I am failing. A mistake becomes, I am a failure. Someone else's success becomes, I am behind. A period of uncertainty becomes, I am not secure. The mind loves simple labels because labels make complicated experiences easier to understand, but they can also trap us. Your circumstances are part of your story. They are not the entire definition of the person writing it. Think of identity as the foundation of a house. Circumstances are the weather. Some days bring sunlight, other days bring heavy rain. If your foundation depends on perfect weather, every storm becomes a threat to the entire structure. But when the foundation is stronger, changing conditions do not automatically destroy your sense of self. This does not mean pretending setbacks do not matter. They matter. Failure can hurt, disappointment can be painful, uncertainty can be frightening. The goal is not to become emotionally numb. The goal is to stop turning temporary experiences into permanent conclusions about your worth. Ask yourself, who am I when nobody is impressed? That question can be surprisingly difficult. Without achievements to mention, what remains? Perhaps your patience, your ability to listen, your willingness to learn, your integrity when nobody is watching, your courage to begin again, your ability to keep going after disappointment, your capacity to treat people well, even when you have nothing to gain. These qualities are quieter than status, but they are much closer to character. Now imagine an experiment. Suppose every external symbol disappeared for 1 year. No one could see your achievements. No one could compare your lifestyle with anyone else's. Nobody could praise your progress. During that year, you would have to build your identity through actions rather than appearances. What would you practice? Would you become more patient, more curious, more disciplined, more compassionate? Would you learn something difficult? Would you strengthen relationships? Would you finally begin something you have postponed? Your answers reveal what you want your identity to stand on. This is where the work becomes practical. Choose 3 qualities you want to be known for, even if nobody rewards you for possessing them. Perhaps you choose discipline, honesty, patience, courage, or kindness. Then stop treating those qualities as abstract ideals. Turn them into behaviors. If you choose discipline, keep one small promise when you would rather break it. If you choose patience, deliberately slow down when you feel rushed. If you choose courage, face one conversation or task you have been avoiding. Every action becomes evidence. You are teaching your mind through behavior what kind of person you are. And this is the important shift. Instead of asking external circumstances to give you an identity, begin building an identity that can survive changing circumstances. You may experience success. You may experience disappointment. You may move forward quickly or spend time rebuilding. Through all of it, you can continue becoming someone you respect. Your circumstances can change overnight. Your character is built more slowly. Protect the slower process. Because when you stop asking money, achievement, or recognition to tell you who you are, you gain something far more stable, the freedom to decide who you want to become. Chapter 3. Hunt down the habits. Quietly shaping you. Most people notice a habit only after it has become difficult to change. Before that, it hides inside ordinary moments. A repeated reaction becomes a routine. A routine becomes familiar. Eventually, the behavior feels so natural that you stop questioning it. You simply say, "That's just how I am." But often, it is not who you are. It is what you have practiced. Consider a fictional character named Julian. Every evening after a long day, Julian would sit down and reach for his phone. He told himself he needed a few minutes to relax. A few minutes became half an hour. Half an hour became an entire evening. The next morning he felt disappointed because he had once again postponed something important. Julian did not have a motivation problem as much as he had a pattern problem. His brain had learned a simple sequence: stress, escape, temporary relief, regret, repeat. The interesting part was that Julian rarely made a conscious decision to repeat the cycle. The routine seemed to happen by itself. This is the hidden strength of habits. They reduce the amount of thinking required to act. That can be useful when the behavior is constructive, but it can also keep unhelpful patterns alive long after you have stopped wanting them. Think of a habit as a path through tall grass. The first time you walk across the field, you have to push through everything in your way. Walk the same route every day, and eventually the grass bends down. The path becomes easier to follow. Your brain works similarly. Repetition creates familiarity, and familiarity makes repetition easier. This is why telling yourself, "I just need more willpower," is often not enough. You need to understand the path. What happens immediately before the behavior? What feeling appears? What thought gives you permission? What reward follows? A habit often has a trigger, a response, and some form of payoff. The payoff might be pleasure, relief, distraction, comfort, recognition, or simply the feeling of escaping something unpleasant. Imagine someone who repeatedly seeks external validation whenever they feel uncertain. The trigger is insecurity. The response is checking what others are doing or looking for approval. The reward is temporary reassurance. But because the reassurance fades, the cycle eventually returns. The behavior is not random. It is solving a short-term emotional problem. That insight gives you something powerful, a place to intervene. You do not have to fight the entire habit at once. Start by finding the moment when the pattern begins. Here is an experiment. Choose one behavior you repeat even though you know it does not serve you well. For the next several days, become a detective rather than a critic. When does it happen? What were you feeling immediately beforehand? What thought appeared? What did you hope the behavior would make you feel? And how did you feel afterward? Do not rush to change anything. Gather information first. You may discover that the behavior appears whenever you are bored, or whenever you feel rejected, or whenever you are overwhelmed, or whenever you finish something difficult and want an immediate reward. Once you know the trigger, you can create a different response. Suppose stress makes you automatically escape into distraction. Instead of demanding that yourself be stronger, create another route. Take a short walk. Sit quietly for 5 minutes. Write down what is bothering you. Complete one small task that restores a sense of control. The replacement does not have to be dramatic. It has to be repeatable. This is where identity enters the picture again. Every repeated behavior sends your mind a message. If you repeatedly avoid discomfort, you may begin to see yourself as someone who cannot handle it. If you repeatedly face small difficulties, you collect evidence of resilience. Think of every habit as a quiet sculptor. It works slowly. Nobody notices one stroke of the chisel, but after enough strokes, the shape changes. Your habits are doing the same thing to you. So do not ask only, what habit should I stop? Ask, what behavior am I rehearsing and where is it taking me? Then choose one pattern. Find its trigger. Interrupt the automatic response. Replace it with something that supports the person you want to become. Repeat it tomorrow, and then again. You are not trying to transform your entire life in one afternoon. You are changing the direction of the path, one step at a time. Eventually, the new path becomes familiar, and what once required effort begins to feel like you. Chapter 4. Catch the emotion before it takes the wheel. We like to imagine that our decisions begin with logic. We think something through, weigh the situation, and then choose. But often the decision begins much earlier, in a place we barely notice. A feeling appears. It changes the way we interpret the moment. Then the mind creates a reasonable explanation for whatever we already feel pulled toward. That does not mean emotions are enemies. They are information. The problem begins when information quietly becomes instruction. Consider a fictional character named Naomi. She had a difficult day. Nothing dramatic had happened, but several small frustrations had accumulated. A conversation went badly. A task took longer than expected. By evening, she felt mentally exhausted. She sat down and started scrolling through her phone. Soon, she noticed something she wanted. Her first thought was simple: I deserve this. The sentence sounded harmless, but Naomi paused. She asked herself, do I actually want this, or do I want to feel different? That question changed the moment. She realized she was not necessarily responding to the thing in front of her. She was responding to the emotional weight she had been carrying all day. She wanted relief. The object had simply become attached to that desire. This distinction is worth remembering. Sometimes we are not chasing an action, we are chasing a feeling. We may chase excitement because we feel bored, approval because we feel insecure, comfort because we feel overwhelmed, control because we feel uncertain, recognition because we feel invisible. The behavior is only the surface. Underneath it is an emotional need asking to be heard. Imagine your emotions as passengers in a car. Fear may shout directions. Anger may demand that you turn around immediately. Envy may insist that everyone else is moving faster. Excitement may tell you to accelerate without checking the road. You do not have to throw the passengers out, but you also do not have to hand them the steering wheel. Self-mastery begins when you can hear an emotion without automatically obeying it. Try this the next time you experience a strong urge. Do not immediately ask, should I do this? First ask, what am I feeling right now? Give the emotion a name. Then ask, what happened just before this feeling appeared? Finally ask, what am I hoping this action will change? These questions create space, and space is powerful. A person who reacts instantly has almost no room to choose. A person who can pause has options. Think about a moment when you felt rejected. Your mind may have immediately wanted to prove something, or perhaps you felt left behind and suddenly wanted to compare yourself with someone else. The emotional reaction might have been understandable, but understandable does not mean inevitable. You can feel envy without feeding it. You can feel fear without allowing it to make every decision. You can feel disappointment without turning it into a judgment about your worth. You can feel an impulse without turning the impulse into an action. That is emotional strength, not the absence of emotion, the ability to remain present while emotion moves through you. Here is a practical experiment. For 1 week, whenever you notice a strong emotional reaction connected to money, success, comparison, comfort, or recognition, create a short pause. Take a breath. Name what you feel. Identify the trigger. Then ask what response would reflect the person you want to become. Sometimes the best response will still be action. Sometimes it will be waiting. Sometimes it will be walking away. The important part is that the choice comes after awareness rather than before it. Imagine standing beside a river. If you jump into every current that passes, the river determines where you go. But if you stand on the bank and watch the water, you can decide which direction deserves your attention. Your emotions are like that river. They move, they rise, they fall, they change. You do not have to become every feeling that passes through you. So the next time you hear yourself say, I need this right now, pause. Maybe you do. Maybe you do not. Find out what is underneath the sentence. Because when you learn to recognize the emotion beneath the impulse, you stop fighting yourself blindly. You begin understanding yourself. And once you understand what is driving you, you can finally choose where you want to go. Chapter 5. Stop using money to prove who you are. There is a subtle difference between enjoying something and needing it to say something about you. The difference is not always visible from the outside. Two people can make the same choice for completely different reasons. One may genuinely value the experience. The other may be trying to communicate, "I have made it," "I belong here," or "I am not falling behind." The action looks identical. The psychology is not. Consider a fictional character named Sophia. She had a habit of noticing what other people had, not because she was deliberately competitive, but because comparison had become part of her attention. If someone arrived with something impressive, she noticed. If a friend described an exciting experience, she remembered it. If someone seemed to be moving ahead in life, she quietly measured herself against them. Then, one weekend, Sophia found herself wanting something she had never cared about before. Why? Because someone else had it. That realization unsettled her. She asked herself a simple question. If I had never seen another person with this, would I still want it? Her answer was uncomfortable. Probably not. That moment taught her something important. Sometimes desire does not begin inside us. Sometimes it enters through comparison. We live surrounded by signals telling us what success is supposed to look like. The impressive lifestyle, the visible achievement, the upgraded version of everything. The image that suggests someone is confident, successful, interesting, or important. None of these things are automatically wrong. The problem begins when they become evidence we use to convince ourselves that we are worthy. Imagine walking through life wearing a jacket covered in labels. Every label tells the world something about you: successful, sophisticated, important, ahead, secure. But eventually, you may become more concerned with maintaining the labels than developing the person underneath them. That is the trap of external identity. You begin living for the reflection instead of the person standing in front of the mirror. Here is a thought experiment. Imagine that tomorrow, every possession you own becomes completely invisible to everyone else. You can still use what you have, enjoy what you enjoy, and experience your life normally, but nobody can see any of it. There is no opportunity for admiration or comparison. What would suddenly lose its appeal? What would remain meaningful? The answers can reveal the difference between genuine preference and social performance. This does not mean you should stop enjoying beautiful things or feeling proud of progress. It means you should know why something matters to you. There is nothing wrong with wanting comfort. There is nothing wrong with appreciating quality. There is nothing wrong with celebrating progress. But when the deeper motivation becomes, "I need other people to see me differently," you have handed part of your identity to an audience. And audiences are difficult masters. They are always changing. Someone will always have something you do not. Someone will always appear further ahead. Someone will always receive more attention. If your sense of worth depends on staying ahead of everyone else, peace becomes impossible because the finish line keeps moving. Think of comparison as a treadmill. It can make you work harder without necessarily taking you anywhere you actually wanted to go. The way off the treadmill is not to stop growing, it is to choose your own direction. So today, examine one desire you have been carrying recently. Ask where it came from. Was it connected to genuine interest? Was it influenced by someone else's lifestyle? Were you trying to reward yourself, impress someone, fit into a group, or quiet an insecurity? Be honest. Then ask a more important question. If nobody knew I had this, would it still represent something meaningful to me? You may discover that some desires remain. Good. Those may reflect your authentic preferences. Others may suddenly feel less important. That is useful too. You are learning to separate what you genuinely value from what you have been taught to display. The goal is not to live without ambition. It is to stop confusing visibility with value. You do not have to prove that you matter. You do not have to win an invisible competition. You do not have to turn every achievement into a public announcement. Build a life that still feels meaningful when the audience disappears. Because the strongest identity is not the one that looks impressive from a distance. It is the one that remains solid when nobody is looking. Chapter 6. Train discipline before you chase freedom. Most people imagine freedom as the absence of restrictions. No one telling you what to do, no schedule controlling your day, no uncomfortable obligations. At first, that sounds wonderful. But there is another side to freedom that rarely gets discussed. When nobody is directing you, your habits become the director. Consider a fictional character named Ethan. Ethan often talked about wanting complete control over his life. He wanted to wake up whenever he wanted, work whenever he felt inspired, and make every decision according to his mood. Yet whenever he had an unstructured day, he discovered something uncomfortable. He did not become more intentional, he became more distracted. He would postpone difficult tasks, follow whatever caught his attention, and tell himself he would get serious tomorrow. Ethan eventually realized that he had confused freedom with the absence of self-control. Real freedom requires the ability to direct yourself. Discipline is not about becoming harsh with yourself. It is about becoming reliable to yourself. It means your actions do not have to wait for the perfect mood before they begin. You can feel tired and still follow through. You can feel bored and continue. You can feel tempted and choose differently. Think of discipline as an internal steering wheel. Motivation can give you speed, but discipline determines direction. Without direction, moving faster does not help. This matters because identity grows from evidence. If you repeatedly tell yourself you are disciplined but constantly abandon your own commitments, your mind eventually notices the contradiction. On the other hand, every small promise you keep becomes evidence that you can trust yourself. That is why enormous goals are not always the best place to begin. Start embarrassingly small. Choose one promise that is difficult enough to require intention but simple enough to repeat. Read for 10 minutes. Complete one task before checking distractions. Take a short walk. Write down your thoughts. Practice something you have been avoiding. The specific action matters less than the relationship you build with yourself. When you say, "I will do this," and then do it, you strengthen self-trust. When you repeatedly say, "I will do this," and abandon it, you strengthen another pattern. This is not about guilt, it is about training. Think of a muscle. You do not become stronger by staring at a weight. You become stronger by repeatedly asking the body to handle resistance. Discipline works in a similar way. Small acts of follow-through create capacity for larger acts later. Here is a thought experiment. Imagine that nobody could ever praise you for your discipline. No one would know that you followed through. There would be no applause, no recognition, and no visible reward. Would you still keep the promise? Your answer reveals whether you are building discipline for external approval or internal strength. Start practicing today. Choose one commitment. Make it specific. Make it realistic. Then complete it without negotiating with yourself every few minutes. When your mind says, "Do it later," notice the thought. When it says, "You deserve a break," notice the thought. You do not need to argue with every excuse. Simply remember the decision you already made. There will be days when you fail. You may break the routine, lose focus, or choose comfort. Do not turn one mistake into an identity. Resume the practice at the next opportunity. Discipline is not never falling off the path. It is becoming someone who returns to it. The deeper purpose is not to control every part of your life. It is to develop enough self-command that your choices are guided by what matters to you, rather than whatever feeling happens to be strongest in the moment. Freedom becomes meaningful when you can direct it. So before asking for more freedom, train yourself to handle the freedom you already have. Keep one promise today, then keep another tomorrow. Over time, those small acts become something bigger than a routine. They become evidence that you can lead yourself. Chapter 7. Interrupt the impulse and take back control. There is a tiny space between wanting something and acting on that desire. Most of the time we barely notice it. A thought appears, the body reacts, and action follows almost automatically. But that small space contains something powerful. Choice. Imagine a fictional character named Caleb. One evening he felt restless after a frustrating day. He opened his phone without thinking and began scrolling. Within minutes, he encountered something that caught his attention. His first reaction was immediate. I want that. Normally, the next step would have been automatic. This time, Caleb put the phone down. He did not tell himself that wanting was wrong. He simply asked, "Why do I want this right now?" The question created a pause. He noticed that the desire had appeared immediately after he felt frustrated. He was not necessarily interested in the thing itself. He wanted the feeling he imagined it would create: excitement, relief, distraction, maybe even a temporary sense of control. Nothing external had changed, but Caleb had changed his position in relation to the impulse. Instead of being pulled by it, he was observing it. That is the beginning of self-control. An impulse is not a command, it is a signal. It can be strong without being correct. It can be uncomfortable without being dangerous. It can demand immediate action while becoming much quieter a few minutes later. Think of an impulse as a wave arriving at the shore. You do not need to fight the ocean. You simply need to understand that the wave will rise, reach its peak, and eventually move back. If you react as though every wave must be followed, your behavior will constantly change direction. The goal is to learn how to wait for the water to settle. This is especially important when emotions are intense. Excitement can make everything appear urgent. Anger can make retaliation feel necessary. Insecurity can make comparison feel unavoidable. Boredom can make distraction feel irresistible. But urgency is not always importance. A useful question is, will this still feel necessary after I have calmed down? Sometimes the answer will be yes. Sometimes it will be no. Either way, you have created room for a conscious decision. Try a simple practice. Whenever you notice a strong urge, do not immediately obey it or fight it. Pause, take a slow breath, name what you are feeling. Then describe the desire in plain language. I want relief. I want recognition. I want excitement. I want to escape this feeling. Once you can describe the desire clearly, it becomes easier to separate the emotion from the action. Then ask, what choice would make me respect myself tomorrow? That question shifts your attention from immediate satisfaction to personal identity. You are no longer asking what feels best for the next 30 seconds. You are asking what supports the person you are trying to become. This does not mean every impulse should be rejected. Some impulses point toward healthy action. The purpose of the pause is not to become rigid, it is to become intentional. Think of a train switch. A tiny movement of the mechanism can determine which track the train follows. The decision may take only seconds, but the direction can change dramatically. Your pause works the same way. One moment of awareness can interrupt an old pattern, and when you repeat that interruption, something interesting happens. You begin to trust yourself around temptation. You discover that a desire can exist without controlling you. You learn that discomfort can be experienced without immediately escaping it. That is mental growth. So today, watch for one impulse. Do not wait for a dramatic moment. Choose an ordinary one. When the urge appears, pause, notice it, name it, question it, then decide. If you make the same choice you would have made before, at least make it consciously. If you choose differently, notice what that feels like. Every pause is practice. Every conscious choice strengthens self-command. And eventually, the space between desire and action becomes larger. That space is where freedom lives. Chapter 8. Define what truly deserves your energy. A person can spend years chasing a life they never consciously chose. They follow the path that receives approval, copy the definition of success they grew up around, and keep moving because everyone else seems to be moving in the same direction. The strange part is that you can become very disciplined at pursuing the wrong destination. That is why knowing what matters to you is not a luxury, it is a form of direction. Consider a fictional character named Oliver. For most of his life, Oliver believed that progress meant constantly doing more. More recognition, more achievement, more experiences, more evidence that he was moving forward. Whenever he reached one milestone, he immediately created another target. From the outside, Oliver looked motivated. Inside, he was exhausted. One evening, he sat alone after a particularly busy week and asked himself a question he had never seriously considered. If nobody cared what I achieved, what would I still want to spend my time doing? He could not answer immediately. That silence told him something. Oliver had become extremely good at pursuing goals, but he had never stopped to decide which goals actually belonged to him. This happens more easily than we think. We absorb definitions of success from family, friends, culture, social media, advertising, and the people we admire. Eventually, borrowed expectations can sound like our own thoughts. You may believe you need recognition when what you actually value is meaningful work. You may believe you need constant achievement when what you actually want is freedom. You may believe you need to impress people when what you really want is to feel respected. You may believe you need more stimulation when what you actually need is rest. The difference matters because values determine direction. Imagine standing at a crossroads with 10 roads in front of you. You can walk quickly, work hard, and remain highly disciplined, but none of that tells you which road deserves your effort. Without values, productivity can become movement without meaning. Your values are the compass. They do not tell you every step to take. They help you recognize whether you are moving in a direction that matters. Here is a thought experiment. Imagine that for 1 year you could not compare your life with anyone else's. You would not know who was ahead, who was admired, who had achieved more, or who appeared happier. There would be no scoreboard. How would you spend your days? Who would you make time for? What would you learn? What would you stop doing? The answers can reveal priorities that comparison has been covering. Now turn those answers into action. Choose 5 values that genuinely matter to you. They might include growth, family, courage, peace, creativity, learning, honesty, independence, contribution, or discipline. There is no perfect list. The important part is that the values are yours. Then ask a harder question. What behavior proves that this value is real? If you say relationships matter, but you never make time for people you care about, the value exists mostly as a sentence. If you say growth matters, but you refuse every uncomfortable learning experience, the value has not yet become behavior. Values become real when they cost you something. Sometimes, living according to your values means saying no to something attractive. Sometimes it means choosing patience over immediate excitement. Sometimes it means disappointing people who expected you to follow a different path. That can be uncomfortable. But discomfort is not always evidence that you are making the wrong choice. Sometimes it is evidence that you are finally making your own choice. Think of your attention as a limited flashlight. Wherever you point it, something becomes brighter. If you constantly aim it at comparison, comparison grows. If you aim it at fear, fear becomes louder. If you aim it at meaningful work, relationships, learning, or personal growth, those areas receive more of your mental energy. You cannot give everything equal attention. So, choose. Today, write down the 5 values you want your life to represent. Then choose one and connect it to a specific action you can take within the next 24 hours. Do not make the action impressive. Make it real. If you value discipline, follow through on something you have been postponing. If you value connection, reach out to someone. If you value learning, spend focused time developing a skill. If you value peace, create a moment without unnecessary noise. Then, repeat. A meaningful life is not created by declaring what matters. It is created by repeatedly spending your attention on what matters. And once you know what deserves your energy, you become much harder to distract. You stop running every race simply because someone else is running it. You begin choosing your direction, and that is where genuine self-mastery becomes possible. Chapter 9. Challenge the scarcity story living in your mind. Some fears do not begin with the present. They arrive from much earlier chapters of our lives, carrying old lessons into new situations. A person may have learned to expect loss, uncertainty, disappointment, or not having enough, and years later the mind can continue reacting as though the original danger is still standing at the door. This is how a scarcity mindset can become more than a temporary concern. It can become a way of seeing the world. Consider a fictional character named Daniel. As a child, Daniel watched the adults around him worry constantly about whether things would be enough. He learned that security could disappear quickly. He learned to hold tightly to what he had. He learned that wanting too much was dangerous because disappointment might follow. Those lessons made sense in the environment where he learned them. Years later, however, Daniel still carried them. Even when life became more stable, his mind remained prepared for the next shortage. He found it difficult to relax. When something went well, he immediately wondered what might go wrong. When an opportunity appeared, he worried that choosing incorrectly would leave him with nothing. When someone else succeeded, part of him interpreted their progress as evidence that there was less room for him. His circumstances had changed, his internal story had not. This is an important distinction. A belief can be understandable without remaining useful forever. Think of the mind as an old map. Imagine someone giving you a map drawn decades ago and telling you to use it to navigate a city that has changed dramatically. The map is not necessarily useless. It may accurately describe where the streets once were, but if you never update it, you may continue following roads that no longer exist. Some beliefs work the same way. A thought that once protected you can eventually restrict you. You might carry beliefs such as, "I cannot relax because something will go wrong." "If someone else succeeds, I am falling behind." Or, "I have to take every opportunity because another one may never come." These thoughts can feel like facts because you have repeated them for years, but repetition is not proof. This is where you begin challenging the story. The next time a scarcity-based thought appears, pause before accepting it. Ask, is this describing what is happening now, or is it repeating something I learned before? That question creates distance between the present and the past. You are not denying reality. You are examining the interpretation you have placed on reality. Here is another thought experiment. Imagine that your younger self could sit beside you today. That younger version of you still carries every fear and lesson from the environment you grew up in. What would you want to tell that person about the future? Would you tell them that uncertainty means disaster? Would you tell them they must constantly compare themselves with others? Would you tell them they can never relax? Probably not. You might tell them that uncertainty is part of life, that setbacks can be survived, and that they are capable of learning as circumstances change. Now practice telling yourself the same thing. Scarcity thinking is not always about wanting more. Sometimes it is about believing that you are never allowed to feel safe, satisfied, or present. That can affect your attention. You may spend so much energy anticipating what could disappear that you fail to notice what is already meaningful. Imagine carrying an empty suitcase everywhere because you are afraid you might need it someday. At first, the suitcase seems practical. Eventually, you realize you are carrying unnecessary weight simply because you are afraid of being unprepared. Fear can work like that. Preparation is useful. Permanent psychological emergency is exhausting, so begin with one belief that repeatedly creates fear or urgency in your mind. Write it down exactly as it appears. Then ask 3 questions. Where might this belief have come from? Does it accurately describe my present circumstances? What behavior does it cause me to repeat? Finally, create a more balanced statement, not a fantasy. Not everything will always work out. Something grounded. For example, uncertainty exists, but I can respond to uncertainty without allowing fear to control every decision. Then practice living according to that statement. The goal is not to erase every fear. The goal is to stop letting old fear write every new chapter. Your past may explain some of your patterns. It does not have to control your future. You can respect where your beliefs came from while still deciding which ones deserve to come with you. That is mental growth. And sometimes growth begins with a simple realization. The alarm you hear today may belong to a fire that no longer exists. Chapter 10. Step out of the invisible competition. Comparison can enter your mind so quietly that you do not notice it happening. You see someone else's progress, lifestyle, confidence, or achievements, and suddenly your own life feels smaller. Nothing about your circumstances has changed, yet your emotional experience has. That is the strange power of comparison. Consider a fictional character named Lucas. He had always considered himself ambitious. He enjoyed improving himself and setting goals. But slowly, his goals began changing. He no longer asked what he wanted to accomplish. He started asking where he stood compared with everyone around him. If someone moved forward, he felt behind. If someone received recognition, he felt overlooked. If someone reached a milestone, his own achievement suddenly felt ordinary. Lucas was running, but he had forgotten why he started. One morning, he imagined something unusual. What if every person around him disappeared from his mental scoreboard? No rankings, no competition, no knowing who was ahead or behind. He would have to decide what progress meant without looking sideways. The thought made him uncomfortable because he realized how much of his motivation came from comparison. This is not a criticism of ambition. Wanting to grow is healthy. The problem begins when growth becomes a race you never agreed to enter. Imagine running on a treadmill while watching another runner on a screen. You may become faster, sweat harder, and push yourself further, but the scenery never changes. You are moving intensely without necessarily moving toward a destination you chose. Comparison can create the same experience. There will always be someone ahead in one area. Someone will be more accomplished, more visible, more confident, or further along. If your identity depends on being ahead, you have created a game that cannot be won permanently. Even success becomes stressful because the moment you reach one level, another person becomes your new measuring stick. The answer is not to stop noticing other people. It is to stop using other people as the ruler for your own worth. When comparison appears, ask yourself, what exactly am I comparing? You may discover that you are comparing your private struggles with someone else's public image. You may be comparing your beginning with their middle. You may be comparing different circumstances as though everyone started from the same place. That is rarely an honest measurement. Try another thought experiment. Imagine that you could not see anyone else's achievements for the next 12 months. You would not know who was progressing faster. You would not know who received more attention. You would not know who appeared more successful. What would you work on? The answer may reveal your authentic ambitions. Perhaps you would improve your discipline, learn something new, strengthen relationships, become emotionally stronger, create something meaningful, spend more time on what genuinely interests you. That is the direction worth exploring. Comparison often consumes attention that could have been invested in growth. So when you catch yourself comparing, do not immediately criticize yourself. Use the moment as information. Ask, what does this person have that I believe I need? Then ask, is the deeper desire actually about the thing, or about what I believe the thing represents? Maybe you want recognition because you want to feel competent. Maybe you want someone's lifestyle because you associate it with freedom. Maybe you envy someone's confidence because you wish you trusted yourself more. Now you have something useful to work on. Instead of copying the visible result, develop the underlying quality you actually desire. This is how comparison can become a teacher instead of a master. Today, identify one comparison that repeatedly steals your peace. Write down what triggers it, what story you tell yourself afterward, and what deeper desire may be hiding underneath it. Then, redirect your attention. Do one thing that moves your own life forward, not because someone else is ahead, not because you need to prove anything, because it matters to you. Your life is not a scoreboard, it is a direction, and the moment you stop asking, "Am I ahead of them?" you can finally ask the question that matters. Am I becoming someone I respect? Chapter 11. Test your character when nobody is watching. Character is easy to describe when life is comfortable. It is much harder to demonstrate when there is no audience, no reward, and no immediate consequence. Most people can tell you what kind of person they want to be. The more revealing question is what they actually do when they have complete freedom to choose. Consider a fictional character named Miriam. She believed she was an honest person. She also believed she was generous, responsible, and respectful of others. None of these beliefs had ever been seriously challenged. Then she found herself in a situation where nobody would know what she decided. There was no camera, no supervisor, no friend waiting for an explanation. She could take the easy path, receive a private advantage, and walk away without anyone questioning her. For several seconds, she considered it. Then she stopped. Miriam realized that the decision was not really about the immediate situation. It was about the person she would have to live with afterward. That moment revealed something important about character. Character is not simply what you believe about yourself. It is the pattern of behavior you maintain when external pressure disappears. Think of character as the hidden framework inside a building. You cannot always see it from the street, but when strong winds arrive, the structure depends on what is underneath the surface. Pressure reveals construction. So does freedom. When nobody forces you to be disciplined, are you still disciplined? When nobody expects honesty, do you remain honest? When nobody can reward your kindness, do you still choose it? When you can avoid an uncomfortable responsibility without consequences, what do you do? These questions are not designed to make you feel guilty. They are designed to make you aware. A person can build an impressive public identity while neglecting the private one. They can speak about patience while reacting aggressively, talk about humility while constantly seeking recognition, claim to value growth while avoiding every situation that exposes weakness. The distance between your stated values and your repeated behavior is where self-awareness becomes necessary. Here is a thought experiment. Imagine that your entire life had two audiences. The first audience sees everything you do publicly. The second sees only what you do privately. Now imagine that the second audience is the only one whose opinion matters. How would your behavior change? Would you still keep the promises you make to yourself? Would you still practice the qualities you claim to admire? Would you still make the difficult choice when nobody would ever know you made it? This is where integrity becomes practical. Integrity means reducing the distance between what you believe and how you behave. That does not mean perfection. Everyone has moments of weakness. Everyone makes choices they later regret. Integrity is not never failing. It is refusing to turn failure into a permanent excuse. When you notice a contradiction, correct it. If you say patience matters, practice patience in an ordinary, frustrating moment. If you say discipline matters, follow through on something when motivation disappears. If you say kindness matters, offer it when there is nothing to gain. If you say courage matters, take one small step towards something you have been avoiding. The action itself may seem insignificant, but identity is built from these moments. Imagine a private room containing a scale. Every time your actions match your values, one small weight is added to the side of self-trust. Every time you repeatedly betray your own standards, another weight is added to the opposite side. Nobody else can see the scale, but you can feel its balance. That feeling is important. Self-respect grows when you know you can trust yourself. So create your own private character test. Choose one quality you genuinely admire: honesty, patience, courage, restraint, generosity, consistency, or humility. Then look for an opportunity to practice it when nobody will praise you. Do not announce it. Do not turn it into a performance. Just do it. Then notice how you feel afterward. There is a quiet confidence that comes from knowing you acted according to your principles without needing an audience. That confidence is different from applause. Applause depends on other people. Character depends on you. And when your private behavior begins matching the person you claim to be, something changes. You stop performing an identity. You start living one. Chapter 12. Build strength that survives changing circumstances. Life rarely asks permission before changing. One week can feel completely stable, and the next can introduce disappointment, uncertainty, conflict, or an unexpected challenge. We cannot control every turn the road takes, but we can become stronger at deciding how we travel it. Consider a fictional character named Andre. Andre had a habit of measuring his emotional state by what was happening around him. When things went well, he felt confident. When plans changed, his confidence disappeared. When people praised him, he felt capable. When someone criticized him, he immediately questioned himself. He did not realize how much power he had handed to circumstances. One afternoon, after a disappointing setback, Andre sat alone and imagined his emotional life as a boat tied to a dock. Every change in the weather pulled the boat in a different direction. Calm conditions produced calm emotions. Strong winds produced panic. He suddenly wondered what would happen if, instead of trying to control the weather, he learned how to strengthen the boat. That question changed his perspective. Resilience is not the ability to prevent storms. It is the ability to remain capable while the storm is happening. Many people misunderstand inner strength. They imagine it means never feeling afraid, disappointed, angry, or uncertain. But emotional strength does not require the absence of difficult feelings. It requires the ability to experience those feelings without allowing them to dictate every decision. You can be disappointed and still think clearly. You can feel afraid and still move carefully forward. You can experience uncertainty and still take the next useful step. That is resilience. Think of a lighthouse during rough weather. The lighthouse does not argue with the waves. It does not demand that the wind stop. Its strength comes from being anchored deeply enough that the storm does not determine its purpose. Your circumstances are the weather. Your principles are the foundation. When circumstances change, return to what you can influence. This sounds simple, but it becomes powerful when practiced. Suppose something does not go according to plan. Your mind may immediately begin producing questions. Why me? What if everything gets worse? What will people think? These thoughts can multiply until the original problem becomes surrounded by imagined disasters. Interrupt that process. Ask 2 questions. What is outside my control? What remains within my control? The first question creates acceptance. The second creates movement. You may not control another person's reaction, but you can control how respectfully you respond. You may not control an unexpected setback, but you can control whether you learn from it. You may not control uncertainty, but you can control whether you allow uncertainty to paralyze you. This distinction protects your mental energy. Imagine trying to push a wall because you want it to move. You can spend hours using effort against something that does not respond. Meanwhile, the door beside you is available, but you never notice it because you are focused entirely on the wall. Resilience requires learning where effort belongs. Here is a practical experiment. The next time something unsettles you, resist the urge to solve your entire future in one moment. Slow the situation down. Name what happened. Name what you feel. Separate facts from assumptions. Identify what you can influence. Then choose one useful action. One action, not 10. Not a perfect plan. One step. That step might be asking a question, having a difficult conversation, learning something, correcting a mistake, resting properly, or simply returning to a routine that keeps you grounded. Small actions restore agency, and agency matters because helplessness often grows when the mind sees no available movement. You do not need complete certainty before taking the next step. You need enough clarity to take the next step. Over time, this changes your relationship with difficult circumstances. Instead of asking, "How do I make sure nothing goes wrong?" you begin asking, "How can I become capable of responding when something does?" That is a much stronger question, because life will continue changing. People will surprise you, plans will fail, opportunities will appear and disappear. You will have days when you feel powerful and days when you doubt yourself. The goal is not to build a life where storms never arrive. Build a mind that knows what to do when they do. Anchor yourself in values. Strengthen your habits. Practice emotional awareness. Keep promises to yourself. Learn from setbacks instead of turning them into definitions of who you are. You cannot control the weather, but you can strengthen the person standing in it. And when your inner foundation becomes stronger than your circumstances, change stops being proof that you are powerless. It becomes another environment in which you can grow. Chapter 13. Rewrite the identity you practice every day. There comes a point in personal growth when understanding yourself is no longer enough. You can recognize your patterns, explain where they came from, and even describe the person you want to become. But eventually, you have to do something more difficult. Behave differently. Knowing is awareness. Doing is transformation. Consider a fictional character named Jonah. For years, Jonah described himself as someone who struggled with consistency. Whenever he started something, he expected himself to lose interest eventually. When that happened, he would say, "See, this is just how I am." The sentence sounded like an observation. It was actually becoming an instruction. Jonah had collected so much evidence for this identity that he stopped looking for evidence that contradicted it. Every unfinished project supported the story. Every missed commitment became another reason to believe he was unreliable. Then he tried something unusual. Instead of promising himself that he would completely change, Jonah chose one small behavior he could repeat every day. He would spend 15 focused minutes working on something important before allowing himself to drift into distractions. 15 minutes seemed almost too small to matter, but he kept doing it. On difficult days, he did 15 minutes. On busy days, he did 15 minutes. On days when he felt motivated, he did 15 minutes. After several weeks, something subtle changed. Jonah no longer had to describe himself as someone who was trying to become consistent. He had evidence that he could be consistent. The behavior had started changing the story. This is how identity can be rebuilt, not through declarations, through proof. We often try to change ourselves by saying things such as, "I need to become more disciplined," or "I need to stop being so emotional." But the mind does not fully trust statements. It pays attention to repeated evidence. If you repeatedly avoid difficult conversations, your mind learns, "I avoid discomfort." If you repeatedly face them, even imperfectly, you create a different message. "I can handle difficult things." That difference is enormous. Think of identity as a biography being written while you live it. Every day adds another paragraph. You are both the character and the author. The previous chapters matter, but they do not have to determine the ending. Maybe your earlier chapters contain impulsiveness. Maybe they contain insecurity. Maybe they contain inconsistency, fear, comparison, or avoidance. You do not have to pretend those chapters never happened. You simply have to stop treating them as the final version of your story. Here is a powerful exercise. Choose one quality you want to strengthen. Do not choose 10. Choose one. Maybe you want to become more patient. Now define what patience looks like in behavior. Perhaps it means waiting before responding when you are angry. Perhaps it means allowing someone to finish speaking without interrupting. Perhaps it means accepting that progress can take longer than expected. Then practice that behavior deliberately. If you want to become more disciplined, define discipline through action. Finish one task before switching to another. Keep one commitment when motivation disappears. Complete something small that you would normally postpone. If you want to become more confident, stop waiting to feel confident. Practice doing something while uncertainty is still present. This is the important shift. Do not wait for your identity to change before changing your behavior. Change the behavior first. Identity often catches up later. Imagine planting a tree. On the first day, you cannot stand beside it and demand that it provide shade. You water it, protect it, and give it time. For weeks, the visible difference may be almost impossible to notice, but something is happening beneath the surface. Roots are developing. Your habits work similarly. The early stages of change can feel unimpressive because the strongest progress may be invisible. You are building evidence before you see results. That is why consistency matters more than intensity. One extraordinary day cannot redefine you as effectively as ordinary behavior repeated over time. And when you fail, do not destroy the identity you are building by saying, "I knew I would mess this up." That sentence turns an event into a prophecy. Instead say, "That was one decision. What will I practice next?" Then return. The goal is not to create an identity that never makes mistakes. It is to create an identity that responds to mistakes intelligently. You can become the person who repairs instead of hides, the person who continues instead of constantly restarting, the person who pauses instead of automatically reacting, the person who chooses values over temporary pressure. Start today with one behavior. Make it small enough to repeat. Make it meaningful enough to matter. Then gather evidence. Tomorrow, add another piece. Eventually, the question will no longer be, "Can I become this kind of person?" Your daily life will already be answering it. You will not have to announce the transformation. Your behavior will speak for you. And that may be the most genuine form of self-mastery. Becoming someone you can recognize, respect, and trust through the choices you make when ordinary life gives you another opportunity to practice who you are. Chapter 14. Lead yourself before life leads you. There is a moment in personal growth when you realize that self-mastery is not about controlling everything. It is about becoming capable of directing yourself when life becomes noisy, uncertain, or uncomfortable. You cannot control every circumstance, every person, or every outcome, but you can become more deliberate about the person who responds to them. Consider a fictional character named Clara. For years, Clara felt as though life was always happening to her. A difficult conversation could ruin her entire day. Someone else's opinion could change how she felt about herself. A disappointing result could make her abandon an important goal. She was constantly reacting, and because every reaction felt justified in the moment, she rarely noticed the larger pattern. One morning, she wrote a sentence on a piece of paper. "I cannot choose everything that happens, but I can practice choosing my response." She kept it beside her desk. At first, the sentence seemed obvious. Then she began using it. When frustration appeared, she paused before answering. When comparison surfaced, she redirected her attention. When she wanted to quit something difficult, she asked whether quitting was actually necessary or simply more comfortable. When she made a mistake, she focused on repair rather than self-punishment. Nothing dramatic happened overnight, but gradually Clara stopped feeling like a passenger in her own life. That is the deeper meaning of self-leadership. A passenger reacts to the journey. A driver watches the road. Both experience traffic, delays, bad weather, and unexpected turns. The difference is that one has accepted responsibility for direction. Your mind works the same way. If you allow every emotion to determine your behavior, your direction changes constantly. If you allow comparison to define your progress, someone else's life becomes your compass. If you allow old beliefs to determine your choices, your past continues making decisions for your future. Self-leadership means learning to pause and ask, what matters here? Not, what do I feel like doing? Not, what will make everyone happy? Not, what would look impressive? But what response reflects the person I want to be? That question brings the entire journey together. You have examined your habits, you have questioned emotional impulses, you have separated identity from external approval, you have challenged comparison and scarcity thinking, you have explored values, discipline, resilience, and character. Now the task is integration. Knowledge becomes useful only when it changes behavior. Think of everything you have learned as tools inside a workshop. A hammer does not build anything by sitting on a shelf. A measuring tape does not improve a structure by itself. The tools matter because someone picks them up and uses them. Your psychological tools work the same way. When you notice an impulse, pause. When comparison appears, return to your direction. When fear tells an old story, question it. When motivation disappears, rely on a small commitment. When circumstances change, focus on what remains within your influence. When you fail, repair and return. These actions may look ordinary. That is the point. Self-mastery is rarely dramatic. It is built in moments so normal that nobody else notices them. There will still be days when you react poorly. You will still lose patience, make mistakes, seek approval, or choose comfort. Growth does not remove your humanity. It changes what you do afterward. Instead of saying, "This is who I am," you can say, "This is something I did, and I can choose what I practice next." That difference creates room for change. So leave yourself with one final challenge. Choose 3 qualities you want your life to demonstrate. Then identify one behavior for each quality. Do not make the behaviors impressive. Make them repeatable. If you want courage, face something you have been avoiding. If you want discipline, keep one small promise. If you want patience, pause before reacting. If you want integrity, make one choice that matches your values when nobody is watching. Then repeat. You do not need to control your entire life. You need to become more trustworthy with the part of life that is actually yours to direct: your attention, your choices, your habits, and your response. Money may reveal patterns. Success may reveal character. Pressure may reveal habits, but none of them gets the final word. You do. Every ordinary day gives you another chance to decide who will hold the steering wheel. Take it. Conclusion. Money can reveal parts of us that ordinary life allows us to ignore. It can bring our habits into focus, amplify our emotional reactions, expose our relationship with comparison, and show us how closely our identity is tied to outside approval. But the deeper lesson of this audiobook was never really about money. It was about the person making the choices. You have explored how habits quietly shape identity, how emotions can influence behavior, how comparison can distort progress, how old beliefs can continue controlling present reactions, and how discipline can become a form of self-trust. You have also looked at values, resilience, character, and the importance of acting according to who you want to become, rather than simply reacting to whatever happens around you. Now comes the part that cannot be completed by listening. You have to practice. The next time you notice an impulse, pause before acting. The next time comparison makes you feel behind, return to your own direction. When an old belief creates unnecessary fear, question whether it still belongs in your life. When you make a mistake, resist turning it into a permanent label. When you make a promise to yourself, give yourself the experience of keeping it. These moments may seem small. They are not. A person is built through repeated moments. You do not become disciplined because you announced that you are disciplined. You become disciplined by practicing follow-through. You do not become confident by convincing yourself that you are fearless. You become more confident by repeatedly discovering that you can handle situations that once intimidated you. Identity follows evidence, so give yourself better evidence. Let your actions demonstrate patience. Let your habits demonstrate consistency. Let your private decisions demonstrate character. Let your response to setbacks demonstrate resilience. And remember that self-mastery does not mean becoming perfectly controlled. It means becoming increasingly conscious. You notice more quickly. You recover more intelligently. You choose more deliberately. There will always be another temptation, another comparison, another difficult day, another opportunity to fall back into an old pattern. That is not failure. That is practice. Think of your life as a long conversation between who you have been and who you are becoming. Every choice adds another sentence. You cannot erase everything that came before, but you can change what you write next. So do not leave this audiobook asking, how can I become a completely different person? Ask something more useful. What is one choice I can make today that the person I want to become would be proud of? Then make it. Tomorrow, make another. Eventually, you may look back and realize that the transformation did not arrive with a dramatic announcement. It happened quietly, through thousands of ordinary choices. Money may expose who you are, but your habits, your discipline, your values, and your daily decisions determine who you become.